All right, welcome to another wonderful edition of the One Hood Power Hour. I am your host, Miracle Jones. We have a very special Power Hour for you this evening. Over the past few months, there's been a conversation about electoral organizing, voting rights, and particularly how that impacts Black men, how Black men are included in this conversation. What are some of the issues? What are some of the legislation? How are people engaging, organizing, and galvanizing Black men when it comes to politics, when it comes to voting, when it comes to even just doing some of the social media, some of the TikTok, some of the songs, and some things have worked, some things have not. And so we're going to have a very special Power Hour tonight where we're talking with Black men who are involved in electoral organizing here in the Mid-Atlantic region. What has been working for them? What are some of the issues that are impacting them? And why are they involved in this process? And so to take us off, I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful co-host, Khari Mosley, who's going to introduce this panel and lead this wonderful conversation. To give respect and deference to the men on this panel, I will be taking an hour off for this hour and giving space to the men. So I hope you are tuned in and I hope you learned something from this next hour. Without further ado, turning it over to the amazing, wonderful Khari Mosley. Take it away.
Thank you, Miracle. And as Miracle said, we have a very special 100 Power Hour this evening. We have a powerhouse lineup to have a discussion about electoral politics with three people I have a ton of respect for, and two who I've worked very closely with over the past year, and one I've worked with, for a long time, and one I'm really excited to get to know better about the wonderful work that he's doing in Philadelphia. So without any further ado, we're going to bring our panel on. We're going to start with my old friend who I've done work with over the last 15 years out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We have a Dr. Rob Biko Baker, the CEO of Render Tech, a political tech consulting firm. He's also a professor at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. And we also have my trusty homie from One Hood Media, the operations director, Farouk Al-Saeed. And we also have Lee Owens from Penn Franchise joining us from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. All three of y'all, welcome to tonight's special Power Hour.
Peace. Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you so much for joining us. So we'll start, with Biko, Farouk, and then go to Lee. And the first question, we had a very, very real crazy election year. We had the midterm elections. We just came out of them. Now, we're a couple weeks, almost 14 days, from the election. Can we just start off with just some initial reflections now, 2 weeks later, of thoughts about, how the election went, how this election year transpired, and your initial thoughts about moving forward into 2023, starting with Dr. Rob Biko Baker.
Well, hi, how you doing, Khari? How y'all doing in Pittsburgh? It's great to see y'all. I've been to Pittsburgh since the last Netroots. I think that was 2009. So it's been a minute.
Wow,
it's been a minute. But I think what we're seeing is there's some strong grassroots movements that are taking place across the country, particularly those that are below the radar of the traditional left and mainstream political parties. And I think if you look at places like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Georgia, you're seeing people who are giving their all to win. And I think without those people, without the grassroots efforts, you don't have this sort of tiny red wave that everybody was talking about.
Thank you, Biko. For Farouk, what are some of your reflections, on the election, the work that we were able to do with One Hood and One Hood Power, and and particularly as someone who voted for the first time, in 2020 and really wasn't, someone who was really bought in to the electoral system. What are your thoughts, coming off of 2022 and looking into 2023?
I think as someone who's a professionally pessimistic person, it was interesting, man. And kind of like Biko said, a lot of this is a testament to a lot of the underground, the grassroots and grass tops organizations. This showed really the power of galvanizing like community resources and pulling together, you know what I mean? And apparently it worked because they were chatting about raising the voting age to 21. So people got pissed off that these 18-year-olds and came out to vote, and everybody made their voices heard at the polls. And I think that's the unfortunate reality since the last election. And even, it goes back as far as I think the American election in Florida, where they started calling it a question of validity of the votes, right? Because the people were speaking out. This was a time right now, I think, me being an adult after voting like for the first time, like you said, like actually seeing the process work on this kind of like, localized scale, but having it juxtaposed on a national one, because the midterm elections, are intrinsic to each specific locality, but also have, the ramifications felt nationally. It's very interesting seeing these organizations come out, very interesting seeing these organizations bind together and speak out, and then, have the backing of celebrities and other politicians and athletes and, things like this. And, and it's even become commercialized to the point where, like, they have voting polls at, professional football stadiums. So like I said, it's very interesting to just see all of this, like, the kind of the endorsements and the branding power and capitalism has behind elections. But as kind of like you had told me, like all politics is local. So just seeing it kind of like you said play out on this way is very fascinating to me.
Thank you. And Lee, share some of your thoughts. For Philadelphia, there's a lot of focus on Philadelphia. Going in to the days before the election, there was a lot of predictions that Philadelphia wasn't going to turn out, and that was going to impact the results statewide, in the state of Pennsylvania. But it seems like those predictions were wrong. So, what happened? Like one. Again, like what are your reflections on the election? And then also, what happened on the ground in Philadelphia that changed from the predictions that you were hearing 2 weeks, 3 weeks out prior?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they said we wouldn't turn out, and we turned out and we won, and I think we were able to make a very solid case moving forward for, encouraging and, getting folks bought into the electoral process. That, like you said, we all, as Black people, as Black men, we aren't always automatically bought in. We can say now that, because let me just go back real quick. Some of these elections that flipped the state house were won by less than 50 votes, right? So I think we have a very strong case to really say that every vote, in fact, does matter. Particularly on the local level, when you look at your state representatives, when you look at your council members, your judges, your district attorneys, every vote counts. And if it didn't, there wouldn't be such a contingency of organizations and coalitions that have been seeking to take away that right to vote since Black people got the right to vote in the 60s. So saying all that to say that, my reflections are all positive, right? Like we really showed up and we showed out. I think what happened in Philly is that, for one thing, Philly is really dealing with a real serious gun violence problem right now, right? And it's not just Philadelphia, as we know, but it's been amplified. Then the message has been amplified in places like Philadelphia, particularly when it comes to campaign rhetoric. But people are looking for answers, right? And people want to see their communities safe, but they also what they don't want to see is a rollback of draconian style policies that perpetuate mass incarceration that disproportionately affect Black and brown people, right? They don't want to see that, but they also want to feel safe, right? So I think what we saw is some real strong organizing, but we saw the right message being relayed at the doors. And I think we really saw an influx of a sort of vote that was asleep for a while, that has been asleep, but that kind of like has awakened a bit, right? And I think that's because people are really concerned about the conditions that are occurring. Again, particularly as it relates to gun violence, mass shootings, poverty, but again, not wanting to see a repeat of the past, and knowing that, you know, our electorate and our vote is one of the ways in which we can really show our power. And people are really starting to see that and understand that. And it's an onus to the people that do organizing work and actually, you know, send out the text messages, knock on the doors, and have the hard conversations.
Thank you for that, and I'll go back to you, Lee, and then we'll go to Farouk, and then go to Biko. You talked a little bit about, you know, the messaging, and we definitely, you know, saw, you know, a kind of uptick in interest in the summertime after the Hobbs decision, you know, overturned Roe v. Wade, and we kind of saw this dip, you know, almost like through Labor Day and and again, like I said, these predictions. You know, that, you know, particularly Black men, but, you know, young people, you know, these constituencies that were needed, you know, on the Democratic side, you know, they weren't going to come out, you know. So what, you know, messages do you think really worked, and how can we draw from those, you know, as we go to next year with the Philadelphia mayor's race and Allegheny County executive race and Allegheny County district attorney's race? You know, what messages worked, and what message should we, you know, kind of bring back and kind of remix and share with the people again, you know, moving forward. And then, you know, and again, that's, you know, to Lee and Farouk and Biko, if you could kind of, you know, listen to their, you know, what they're saying, and kind of just share some of your, you know, perspective as a scholar and an educator at the university level of what, you know, what you're hearing, and what are some of the conclusions that we can draw as more effective ways to communicate, you know, to the electorate, starting with Lee.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first I'll start and say what didn't work, right? And I think part of what we had in our favor was that, again, there's this contingency. I don't know. I can just be honest, right? I can say Democrat, Republican. I can talk like that on here. Okay. Yep. So great. All right. So, and it's 7 o'clock. So I'm not on the clock. Bet. So there's been a contingency of Republicans, right, as we know, that has aligned themselves with, you know, former President Trump. And, you know, politics, I would say, since Obama have been extremely polarized, right? There's been a sort of murder, a lynching of centrist politics. Is no more, right? And so what we're seeing, and what we've been seeing for a while, is this extreme right-wing contingency of people that are racist, first and foremost, because a lot of them are voting against their own self-interest because they poor, right? And what they did was they came out and voted for Trump in 2016 because they, and on one side of it, they hated Obama, right? And so one of the things that we saw is sort of an answer to that pro-Trump, anti-Black racist sentiment that we saw in 2016 that got Trump over the hump, that we really wanted to reverse, and we kind of did reverse it in 2020, right? And that's on the Democrat, on the federal level. But I think on the local level, one of the messages that we've been really like hammering down is that when it comes to electoral politics, right, a lot of times folks think of the presidential when they say it doesn't matter what happens. What's going to happen is going to happen. It's like, all right, yeah, that might be true with the presidential, you know, because we don't really feel the policies that go in effect on that level, except when it comes to unemployment. I was on unemployment about 10 years ago, and they wouldn't pass the federal line, the second tier benefits, and I felt that. But I will say that being able to show that all politics is local, and that when you are involved in the electorate and you're voting for judges and district attorneys and people that are affecting your everyday life, and they have the potential the ability to lock you up for something stupid. I think that was one of the messages that we really sort of hammered this year, particularly with the formerly incarcerated community and their families and friends, but really with all marginalized groups in which we were seeking to like rally up that vote. I think people seeing that like Dr. Oz, you know what I'm saying, you know, coming from Jersey, like things like that showed that like these seats, like people want these seats for a reason, right? So like they're getting what they want out of it. If they're getting what they want out of it and we're not getting nothing out of it, why is that? And the answer is because we're letting other people make the decisions for us as to who's going to lead us. So with that in mind, I think we were really able to have really serious and heartfelt conversations about why the electorate is important, and not just to get some person elected, right? But in my opinion, I think being involved in the electorate is a gateway into advocacy and activism, particularly for somebody like myself that's formerly incarcerated, that, you know, came home 20 years ago with a felony on his record that had to check the box, right? And was denied a lot of employment opportunities because of my felony, right? And so realizing that I had to, if I was going to have a meaningful career, then part of that career had to be serving the community that I never thought I'd be a part of. And in doing that, I realized that building power within that community and other marginalized communities is the way to obtain the kind of things that we want to see in our communities and see our community changes. And one way to build power is in the electoral process. And I'll say this one last thing really quick, which is that the politicians that get elected based on like big campaign donations from, you know, large super PACs, big corporations, right? Those electors are beholden to the people that give them those big campaign donations. When we build power in coalitions and within like-minded coalitions and elect our leaders, and we're responsible for their candidate, for their win, right? Then they're beholden to us. And if they're smart, they're going to do what's best for us, for the people, right? And if we can wrap our heads around that, I think you'll see a lot more of us voting in the coming elections, a lot more of us being campaign managers, being advocates, activists, getting involved in not just the electoral process, but in the wider fight for civil rights, for social justice.
Thank you, Farouk. I think you're on mute.
Damn, I was muted. I just dropped the ball too. But nah, like, you know, the brother just said a lot. You know what I mean? Nas said it. You know, street niggas turn activists that used to move packages. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of like the people who dispelled a lot of myths around voting in the most recent election. There's a lot of myths around the Black community. There's a lot of myths around who vote, who doesn't vote, and what issues are important to what constituency. I think the biggest thing that we took away from his and looking at electoral politics, specifically in this one between Fetterman and Oz, was it's not just a popularity contest, right? It's not just people running on a list of superlatives. You know what I mean? People really care about issues. And I think one of the largest contributing factors, which was huge for me, and there was a hashtag that I even used, you know, vote like a Black feminist. That was things that were like super important to me, just, you know, from personal issues and issues that I took to matters of the heart. This was a big turning point for a lot of people in this election, as a lot of Black women were voting, as a lot of women in general were voting and coming out to the elections or to the polls to say, yo, listen, all them other things don't matter. You're not going to tell me what I can and can't do with my body. Right. And I think that was, you know, and that was one hell of a message to not only organize around, but to amplify. So just from a ground level and from an aerial view, from where I stood, that seemed to be one of the largest, if not the largest point. Not to say that the other matters were inconsequential. It was just something that, like, you know, I pay very close attention to just for the line of my work. And, you know, most of the people I talk to on a daily basis anyway are women. So, you know, that's just like something I'm always going to be listening to. You get me?
That's right.
Biko? You're on mute, Biko.
there's a lot of wisdom in both of those points, particularly the intersection of the incarceration system and its impact on our voting power, and then the role that Black women play. And I think that Black women have been voting, particularly when you look at communities like Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Milwaukee, where a large percentage of Black men are incarcerated. Our vote and our political power oftentimes lies in the hands of Black women. And so salute and shout out to them for always doing their due diligence. But I would say that this time, the Democratic Party, I don't think, did their best to not only engender their support, but also play up issues that matter to them. And, you can see in places like Georgia and Wisconsin where, I think abortion was the number one thing on the ballot, but there wasn't a lot of other things. And we do know that Black folks particularly are the most spiritually focused people by any surveys. 83% of all African Americans identify with some type of religion or spirituality. And so abortion is always on the agenda. It's never not on the agenda, but it cannot be the only thing on the agenda. And I do believe until Black folks have a strong, robust agenda that's related to their material needs, particularly connected through the infrastructure bill or broadband or something like that, I believe that we'll sort of sway back and forth. And it's up to us as, now middle-aged people, me and Khari, middle-aged people, to establish an agenda that doesn't sway with the winds of a political donor or, a candidate. We got to get real about what we want. We got to stick to it, and we got to fight for it. And until we do that, we'll continue to be on the menu, And what do I mean by we'll be on the menu? Meaning that they're just gonna pop up us and give us these little agenda items, and we'll get our little checks at the end of the election. October, November, we'll get our little checks, and we'll have to do the most in the least. Shout outs to Miracle. We got to produce a lot of miracles, But if we fight on the front end, and really push our agenda over the next 18 months, we can change the situation. Because here's the thing. Over the next 20 years, America is getting browner. So we're going to get more power, baby. So we might as well start now.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks. And I'm going to go.
Hold on. I'm not middle-aged, man.
I shot it to Khari.
I was like, wait. Allow me, bro.
Hey, but next week you will be though.
Next week you will be directed to me.
Yeah, that's right.
And Big, I'll go back to you. We'll go back, in reverse order, because everything that we're talking about kind of brings me back in many ways to conversations that we've had, over the last dozen or so years, and what some ways kind of got us into the situation that started in 2016. And for those who are just joining us, we're with Lee Owens from Philadelphia. We're with Dr. Robigo Baker from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Farouk Al-Saeed from One Hood Media here in Pittsburgh. And, we talked a lot about, me and Biko met in 2004, actually in Newark, New Jersey, at the National Hip Hop Political Convention. And in 2004 and 2008, there was a ton of investment in engaging young voters, engaging quote unquote non-traditional voters. And that really started a movement that allowed Barack Obama to win the Democratic primary in 2008 and win the election. But then after Barack Obama got elected in 2008, there was a huge disinvestment. There was a huge divestment, from the work that started in 2003, 2004 through 2008 into 2009. And that kind of, to me, kind of created, this pattern that culminated, into 2016. And now it looks like we're seeing, starting back in 2018, this reinvestment back into, the work, the same kind of work that began in 2004. So just starting with Biko, how can we avoid, falling back into, the situation that we fell back into in 2012, which also ultimately culminated in 2016, which is a situation now we're 6 years out, and we're still trying to fight. We're looking at 2024. Former President Trump just announced, he's running again. So how do we convince, and again, we don't want to get stuck in the donor cycle, but again, how do we convince donors and foundations, and those who fund civic engagement work, not to drop the ball again and just continue to fund this work, not even just during the even number years, but as we go into these local elections, in the odd number years, and support that, as particularly, as a political scientist, what do you think are, the arguments that we need to be making when we're with donors to say, like, just don't wait until the midterms or wait till the presidential year. We got to have a more sustainable, system of supporting civic engagement work all year round.
Yeah, I mean, in 2008, there was this upswell of grassroots organizing, and everybody wanted to be an organizer because Obama was an organizer. Remember that? Some of y'all too young, but I remember that. And what ended up happening was it was a misinvestment. It was a misinvestment. And the people on the left really thought that the party could sustain long-term grassroots organizing. And what happened over 4 to 6 years after Obama's, presidency, or during his presidency, you see this weakening of grassroots organizations such as League of Young Voters, which me and Khari were part of. But there was also an organization I was part of called the New Organizing Institute, which was basically the whole incubator of the data advantage that the left had prior to 2016 and 2020. And that organization was also gutted. And so we can never expect donors or funders to fund our revolution. They're not going to do it. They're going to wage their bets. They're going to look towards the margins, and they're going to get just enough to get to those margins. And they're afraid of movements. I've had big donors tell me that they're afraid of movements. And the reality is, if we are going to build a movement that's going to sustain, we as grassroots organizers and nonprofit organizations have to fund our own movement. And how do we do that? Well, if you look at the model like One Hood, you look at the model like we had in Milwaukee with Flood the Hood with Dreams, we are tying art and culture with the organizing. And through the arts and culture, you can sustain your base building. And so right now, I ain't part of no organization. I'll have no organization, but I'll tell you what, me and my people moved a lot of votes through the culture. And I think that we also have to be willing to, and me and Khari, when I was a young person, I had way too much time on my hand. I was in the Mexican War streets. I was in, Homewood, Wilkinsburg, knocking doors. We have to give young people an opportunity to learn. And so that if we can't expect the funders to invest in us, we as elders and movement leaders have to really invest in young people and let them make mistakes and get it together.
Farouk, any reflections on that?
Yeah, man. To Biko's point, I'll provide some comedic relief. I am old enough to remember. I just wasn't in the States for it. But I remember it happening. And like you said, everybody kind of wanted to be an organizer. And I still think that's very true today. Like, there's still a lot of glamour associated with like organizing until people actually have to do it. And then, they see like they get, disenchanted with that very fast. Like, even myself, I don't like the title organizer, right? I just kind of like belong to an organization that does the work, and I'm here, kind of aiding and abetting, so to speak. But for as the youngest person here, and someone in like kind of like Lee, he came out the streets and was formerly incarcerated. Like, it looks a little bit different for me as an immigrant, as someone who comes from a very specific intersection that does not ever get represented in the fullest of the capacity that I represent as a human being. Electoral politics is something I've always looked at kind of like down the bridge of my nose at. And I never am fully invested in a politician one way or the other, right? And to harken this back to like the all politics is local, the ramifications of the presidential election are kind of like always going to be whatever, right? It's always kind of be like, whatever it is, it's going to be. The hood was fucked up of Obama, Bush, whatever. Even if you elect a prime minister, right, the ends still stay the ends at the end of the day. It's your local elections that I'm learning and very invested in at this juncture in my life. And it's even been floated in Khari, like it's been floated to us at One Hood, like we should all each run for an office, right, in our respective jurisdictions. And even having that type of a conversation makes you look at electoral politics in a completely different lens, because now you become invested in like seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak, right? You get to see what it's like behind closed doors. And just even this election, I was in more close proximity with the candidates. And it's funny because like I'm on a name-to-name basis with politicians I didn't even know who knew me, right? That makes me understand how much they pay attention to what's happening on this ground level, right? In the places that we be in, you know what I mean? I'll have a politician come and dap me up and be like, yo, Farouk, what's up? I'm like, I don't even know this man, right? But it's very interesting to me because that's so fascinating to just show how astute your local politicians are, right? For even right or the wrong reasons. We're not talking about where you lean left or right, but they still have a general understanding of the lay of the land. And that gives us as organizers a specific fuel. It's like, okay, they're listening to us. This election, you've seen we had the biggest success margins for what we did because of our message and tying in, like Biko said, the arts and the culture aspect of it, right? Black people are inherently cultural and artistic people. So whenever we get out to organize in the way we do it, ain't nobody going to do the shit like we do it. You get me? Like, it's going to have a special flavor the way we can do that. And we show that in, in wow, extravagant ways this election. You know what I mean? Just like that. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but like, me and Khari and Austin, like the One Hood team, we was rolling around the back of the truck. I was rapping downtown Pittsburgh all throughout the ends, like, yo, you know what I mean? It was like a viral moment for us. You know what I mean? Like people was hanging out the windows, like with their phones, seeing us out there and everything like that. Pittsburgh don't ever see nothing like them things there. You get me? So like when we were able to do that and kind of like command that moment for us and then see that happen simultaneously in all these other places across the country, yo, come on, man. And the politicians seen that, and there's some of the fear, some of the respect it.
Absolutely. That's right.
Lee?
Yeah, man. I love everything I've heard. A lot of the work that we're doing with Penn Franchise, which is an organization I founded earlier this year in January, is that we're trying to use the electorate as a gateway into advocacy, into building power, and into doing the kind of work that like Farouk does, that like, One Hood does, that, we want to create Malcolm X's and Martin Luther King's, you know what I mean? And like, the reason why people like that were so effective is because they understood the people and the people loved them, right? And so I think, what we've been doing at Penn Franchise is focusing specifically on currently and formerly incarcerated voting blocks, because that's it's the community that I'm a member of. But what I learned was that each community that you go into, that when you try to supposedly infiltrate, right, and try and get people to do something that they're not used to doing, that they don't think even matters, right? You need a trusted messenger, right? Now, I did a year on Rikers, right? I mean, and fine, but there are people that I work with that did 30 years, 10 in solitary confinement, right? And so, like, when we go into the hood and say vote, they're gonna vote. Most of the time, you know what I mean? But more than that, it's because we're not just telling them to vote, we're telling them why it's important. And we're not even just doing that. We're saying, yo, why don't you be a part of this movement where you could potentially, where your felony wouldn't even make a difference? You can use your felony to make a career for your life. Not saying you can do that only if you vote, but I'm saying this is the way to get to that point. This is how you do that. I started off volunteering on campaigns, on judicial campaigns. And I was seeing how thirsty politicians were to get votes, right? There's a reason why. And so the last thing I'll say is that I was Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner's, I was one of his staff members in the 2017 campaign, right? And so when I tell you, brethren, that there were people that were doing time upstate, right? It was a whole like coalition of people doing time upstate that was working to get Larry Krasner elected while they're serving decades, y'all. they saw why it was important. And some of them are home now because of Krasner's policies, and I'm working with them right now. How crazy is that? So when you're able to have those kinds of success stories and have those, people that you can look to and be like, yo, this dude did that thing, right? And so I think that is the work that we're doing that's going to sustain what we saw happen this year, right? And so, in my opinion, the next phase of this thing is to take it a step beyond always telling our people Democrat, 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 right? We want to vote Republican, but what's the alternative, right? What's the alternative? And that's saying that if the Democrats don't do what we want or give us what we need, right? We need to ensure that if the Democrats and the Republicans are out of line, that there is another option. And so as we're building this power, that's the other conversation we're having as the next phase of this movement in the electoral politics is to give an alternative to Democrat, Republican, because as much as the Republicans don't do what we need them to do, a lot of times the Democrats fall short too, right? And so we got to also hold them accountable. And as leaders in this community, we can't always be sending our people and say, vote Democrat if they're not going to do what we need them to do. So that's the next phase of this conversation. In this movement.
If I could just jump in real fast, because you just said something great. Like, I know One Hood, we've come under fire before, of being accused of, if not playing respectability politics, then always telling Black people to vote blue, right? And in certain situations, that's what we have to do. Me and Jasiri were on CNN earlier this year holding Biden and the Democrats to task. Like, yo, like you campaign on something that was bullshit.
Yep.
Show and prove. Like, we put you in office because we demanded something. Now we demanded something, right? And that's the thing. It's like, in the Black community, I know no Black experience is monolithic. And there's a lot of us that do lean, I don't say a lot, but there are Black people that lean conservative, that do, but Black people are morally conservative people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thing right there. But like you said, we can't sit here and just play Republican, Democrat, Republican the whole time, because we're not represented entirely by either party. And it's at this point where we have to use the ballot and the voting box as a tool towards liberation, and stop looking at the election as like the end all be all.
Yep. Yo, the accountability part is I cannot stress. I used to be a lobbyist for the union, right? For one of the biggest unions in the country. And when I tell you that when they put money on the table to get somebody elected, you best believe there were going to be conversations all that following year to make sure that person did their job. And so I cannot stress that it does not stop at the election, that accountability piece, when they, and like knowing, I'm in Philly, but knowing what's going on in Harrisburg is paramount. I got to know what's going on. Can't just be worried about what's happening in Philly. I got to know how they're voting, right? I got to know when they're taking bad votes. Right?
And that goes to our people, our community, to vote conservative and Republican. Hold your elected officials accountable. Like, don't just do this online activism that you get enamored with and fall in love with. And I don't want to monopolize Biko's time at all, but like, if you're a voter out there, bottom line, hold your elected officials accountable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about Jesse Jackson's 1984 10 Lee Baptist speech, where she said, you got a chance, you got a choice. He talks about the mighty David slaying Goliath with the rock. And in the speech, he uses the metaphor of the rocks being votes that are just laying around. And David just picked up a rock, threw it at the mighty Goliath and knocked him down. And, he was talking about the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980. But, we know that there are rocks laying around all over our communities, whether that's the formerly incarcerated people, the people living in the margins of despair who don't believe that society is giving them a chance. Or it could be the brothers that have sort of felt that they've been left out of the progressive movement. But, it's my belief that we are a lot more powerful when we stick together. And so I'm always down to connect with people and organizations that are thinking differently. In fact, this past election in my hometown, we had the mayor of Milwaukee come to an event, and his name is Boosie, and the little Boosie. And the guy that hooked me up with little Boosie was a black Republican, you know? And I asked him why he did it. And he said, F those dudes running for Senate, man. You know what I mean? And any other issue, me and him are not getting along. We're not ideologically aligned, but sometimes you have to have operational unity in your communities. And I believe that once we start to have this moment of operational unity, we start to put our egos down, we start to have an agenda. That's when we become powerful and unstoppable. And it's coming sooner than people are ready. Because when I was a young person, older folks didn't really want to work with young people. You know what I mean? And didn't really want to work with each other. You know, you'd be in this room and you'd be like, dang, are they gang banging? Like, what's going on here? And today, you know, with the power of the internet, with the power of collective action, and sometimes, yeah, we can be mad at the internet and collectivism, but what I do is I see as young people organizing and sticking together in ways that we couldn't even have imagined 10, 15 years ago. And so if there's going to be a wave, let it be a black wave, you know, a black wave led by young people.
Thank you for that. You know, I think it is really important, you know, to highlight, you know, the cultural piece, like you know, bringing Boosie, you know, to Milwaukee, you know, to do the early voter stuff, and obviously, you know, the stuff that Farouk, you know, talked about we did on election day, you know, riding around the city for about 6-7 hours, you know, with a DJ, you know, on the back of a U-Haul, you know, playing music, and Farouk, giving selections from his album, you know, Revolutionary but Gorgeous, which is available on all streaming platforms. Very, very dope album, you know, and yeah, like I definitely got mad text messages, you know, after that, and there was a lot of people putting up social media posts, you know, about that, you know, just that. I mean, I'll never forget when we were downtown on Liberty Avenue, and it was like kind of some traffic, so we was like stuck at a light, you know, where you was able to do like basically a whole song, you know, from your album, you know, right in front of Social Status, in front of the Wood Street subway station. And like, you know, it was like one of those iconic moments, man. People was like, yo, you know what I mean? And then you would always, you know, in between, you know, you got till 8 o'clock to vote tonight, you know what I'm saying? Protect Black women, you know what I'm saying? Vote, you know what I'm saying? You could just see how people was responding, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, even, you know, older white progressives, you know, that was walking down the street, you know, they was getting hyped, people honking their horns, you know what I'm saying? And like showing that, because I think sometimes with electoral work, you know, sometimes folks get so caught up into the door knocking part and the phone banking part and the blocking and tackling, which is, you know, important, you know, which is critical to engaging people, you know, but sometimes they miss, you know, that, you know, the stuff like the cultural piece, which are kind of like the intangible pieces that, you know, that connect people, like those people that was, you know, I mean, I know there was people down there at the subway station that wasn't thinking about voting. Then they heard, you know, Farouk spitting those bars, was like, damn, hold up, that's, you know, like when I go home, I'm gonna go vote. You know what I mean? Where the door knock or even a text message, you know, or the phone bank or the direct mail piece, you know, wouldn't have moved them, you know, the same kind of way, you know. So I think it's, you know, really, really important, you know, as we move forward, you know, and look at, you know, these local elections, you know, that are coming up, and I just want to make a quick segue to that, because that is so important. I wanted to jump to Lee, and could you just, you know, talk a little bit about the local elections that are coming up, you know, in Philadelphia, you know, and you know, what's at stake, and you know what people are looking at.
So, yeah, next year, man, we're gonna be voting for a crap ton of council members and the mayor. I believe there will be some state Senate seats and probably some state house seats throughout Pennsylvania, but in Philly, it's going to be all about the mayoral's race and council at large, and some council seats that have become available as a result of council members running for mayor. And so, you know, again, part of the work is going to be, because of the state that Philly is in right now, a lot of it is going to be making sure that this isn't a referendum on the progress we've made in the areas of working to end mass incarceration and criminal justice reform in Pennsylvania. And I say that because, right, like our work is to make sure that the language, which turns into the action, doesn't roll back to the extent that, you know, reformist electors like Krasner, you know, whose policies really are like not as radical as everybody's making them out to be. Really, it's just leveling the playing field. It's giving it's given us what white people have gotten for decades, the benefit of the doubt. That's all it is, right? And so, you know, the policies that disproportionately affect Black and brown people, like high bails, you know, life without parole, and then you look at some of the conviction integrity union in the DA's office, where it's like, you know, making sure that the convictions that have occurred in Philadelphia are sound and not based in corruption or racism, which we found a lot of them were, right? So we got to make sure that during this council race and during this mayoral's race that we don't start talking, you know, this tough on crime narrative that's outdated. You know, this, you know, we need more police on the streets, which we know does not solve anything, right? You know, spending more money on, you know, police departments and not enough money on addressing systemic issues like education, like investing in the community, right? And so a lot of the work is going to be getting people to the polls for those races, but more than that, it's going to be controlling the narrative that these candidates spew, and making sure that they don't buy into the notion that we've rolled back, right? That we haven't made progress, that what we're doing is too radical, and that what we're doing is wrong. And so there's a lot at stake here. I don't know if you guys know, but DA Krasner was impeached by the Pennsylvania State House last week in a party line vote, well, mostly party line. And so as we're talking to formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated people about voting, because we talk to folks in jails too, as we're talking to Black and brown people about why it's important to vote, I mean, it's going to be hard to make a case for that if there are Republicans in other counties nowhere near Philly that are trying to make the decision for us as to who we elect for our district attorney, right? And so there's always going to be that work that, you know, goes into making sure that folks know how important the electorate is, despite, you know, the progress we make, and how they try to take back that progress right away, right? And so, you know, next year is going to be crazy. Like I said, we got to make sure that we don't backtrack, because we've made a lot of progress, but there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made. And the only way we can do that is if we have leaders on our side that are decision makers and that can move mountains for us and our movement.
Thank you. That's a great segue to jump to Farouk, because obviously what, you know, brought me, you know, to the One Hood family, even though I was, you know, one of the original founders back in the day, and then started doing national work and work in the green economy before coming back to 100 in 2019, was the 2019 district attorney's race, where Teron Jenkins, you know, lost to longtime incumbent Stephen Zappala in the primary, and then Lisa Middleman, who's now a judge, you know, ran against Stephen Zappala in the general election, and we, you know, did some work around you know, mobilizing people. Now we're, you know, back 4 years later, that fast. I can't believe 4 years, you know, has passed.
Who you telling, man?
So quickly. And now, you know, we're back. It looks like Stephen Zappala is going to try to run for a 6th term, you know, in office. And it looks like Chief Public Defender Matt Dugan, who actually has a close relationship with Larry Krasner, who actually, you know, had a situation when he was a young student at Villanova where he needed Larry Krasner to do some legal work for him, you know, as a young person. And actually, you know, that experience is actually what inspired him to go to law school and become an attorney. You know, so now he's running, you know, for district attorney in Allegheny County next year. And you know, Farouk, you know, what are some of your thoughts, you know, about that race? Because, you know, clearly, you know, folks on the other side are going to try to use the impeachment proceedings of Larry Krasner and some of the critique against Larry Krasner as a reason why Allegheny County shouldn't go in the same direction that Philadelphia did in electing a progressive, you know, district attorney. You know, so what, you know, taking, you know, your One Hood, you know, 501c3 hat off and just, you know, speaking as the supervillain, Farouk Al Saeed, Super MC. Like, what are your thoughts about, how we need to message that to the people, why it's so important to move forward with a progressive district attorney that's going to take a different approach, to law enforcement, and criminal justice reform in Allegheny County, like they did in Philadelphia 4 years ago.
Man, whew. I'm still a public figure, so I gotta kind of watch what I say. But I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and he was chatting like he was at the cinema and he was upset that there wasn't extra police there while he was at cinema because the youth be wilding. I was like, bro, why do you want police there at the cinema, right? And I don't understand. He's like a super civilian, right? And I get it, like and we were having this conversation today in the office, and it was just like sometimes Black people see the police and they feel safe in the community. It's like, oh, I need to know that the police are there. Whereas like when white people see the police, they know they bring the property value down. So it's like, what are you doing in my neighborhood? Right. So, I mean, that's a fact. Like if you have police in your suburbs, your property value goes down. If you live close to a precinct, your property taxes are shit, and not in a good way. You know what I mean? So to have a progressive DA, we need that because we're always going to be the people who feel the blowback of all enforcement of crime legislation. That's just all going to fall on our doorstep, and it's going to fall hard and ugly, right? And the moment these, you get someone who's tough on crime, which is just, a dog whistle for anti-Black, and, all these different tactics, is someone running like that, you get a Mastriano, you get, whomever that's running is going to throw their hat on, throw their cape on and say, let's lock these niggas up. You know what I mean? You're going to upset the balance of people, and you're also going to empower a lot of white supremacists. And you're going to turn this into a matter of who feels safe where. Yep. Right. And with gentrification happening in Pittsburgh at an expedient rate, Pittsburgh in 2019 was the 8th most gentrified city in the country. Right now it's number 6. Right. And when those statistics happen, what that equals is unsafe environments for Black people, because gentrification is just another form of violence. And then when you start putting these tough on crime policies, these quality of life enforcements in these Black neighborhoods, well, then Black people are no longer welcome there. Black people are no longer made to feel safe there. We're getting chased out of areas that we patronize every day. We're getting chased out of. I like this angle, John. Thank you. I look really good right now. We get made to be someone that we're not in areas that we live and go to school and send our children to. So even though it's more of an indictment against the systemic issues, the people that you vote for are going to be the ones that lock everybody up or put them out back on the streets for whoever has the most resources. So a mayoral election, a county commissioner, a county controller election, a DA election. These are things that, your cousin might feel strongly about. Your uncle, your auntie, somebody who's like, had run-ins with the law that say, hey, you know what, man, this DA chatting some nonsense. Like I can't, stand for somebody like that. We need cultural competency to be the currency. All that alliteration just kind of blended really nice. I didn't do that on purpose. But like we need that to have our elected officials to be like, yo, you know what? I know what's happening in these communities is beyond just a Black and white issue. And I'm speaking figuratively, not quite literally, but like metaphorically, these are systemic issues that these communities have been, plagued by. And how can I, govern or rule or, exist in a space of electoral politics, of community policing, whatever phrase they want to use that's hot at the time, intelligently, not only on a cultural level, but on a human level, right? No one want to be in jail. Like, Lee, bruv, you know what jail like. That shit ain't cool. You know what I mean? Like, man, know what solitary confinement is like. No human being needs to be locked up in that. That's right. And with Allegheny County Jail being one of the most egregious perpetrators of human rights violations in the country, we don't need to send people into that, especially with COVID still happening. That's a death sentence sometimes. And we don't need a DA that's like trigger happy and just locking people up, just like, like, whatever. Like we don't need them things. So this is super important, man. And again, all politics is local. I don't want to sound like, someone that I have a lot of friends that, Lee, you probably get it too. You come off the road. a lot of your men that be like, yo, nigga, why you chatting this vote thing? Like, you wasn't chatting them noises 20 years ago. Well, because I was I was breaking the law 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, I was doing all kinds of madness out here.
Wasn't the same person back then.
Yeah, I was the same person. I just didn't have I just didn't apply my consciousness the way I'm applying it now.
That's right.
And that's the thing. It's like people listening to this, and Lee talked about it, Biko talked about it, Biko on the PhD side, right? And man, no words in that. Don't hear the accent and think that man can't drop a 5-syllable word on you real fast. I was a teacher for 7 years. You know what I mean? But like, yo, like the fact of the matter is, no matter what your economic status is, right? No matter where you align politically, there's going to be an issue where a DA election is going to affect you, right? There's going to be an issue on that ballot when an elected official is going to have an absolute influence on your life. And if you just gloss over that to like, oh, this isn't really, you know what I mean? You're making an egregious mistake.
Appreciate that. And I want to jump to Biko because, you know, we're talking about, you know, Black men in politics. And I think one of the most unknown, untold, you know, political stories in the entire country is that, you know, the city of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County are run by 2 Black men in their mid-30s. You know what I mean? You know, county executive David Crawley, you know what I mean, who's like 36, 37, you know, and Mayor Chevy Johnson, you know, who's like 36, you know, years of age. I don't think that's probably ever happened, you know, anywhere, you know, in the country. And you know, and it's something that's really not being told. You know, how is having 2, you know, millennial Black mayors, well, a millennial Black county executive and a millennial Black mayor, you know, impacting the city of Milwaukee? Isn't it having an impact on, you know, the political landscape? You know, and if so, what is it?
Yeah, Carl, when you know, when we first started in 2004, we sort of were an insurgency movement where we had, you know, dozens of young Black people who were poets and rappers and beat makers, sort of standing up against the white man who ran for mayor in 2004 and beat a legendary African American by the name of Marvin Pratt. And so for, you know, 18 years, we stood on the outside and built power, first at the, you know, aldermanic level, and then continuing to build at the city and county level. And so, for example, our county executive, his name is David Crawley. His nickname used to be Dirty. I remember when he was 17, 18 years old and was just first starting to become an organizer. And our mayor is Cavalier Johnson, and our sheriff is Ernell Lucas, and our congresswoman is Gwen Moore. And we have a lot of Black power in the city of Milwaukee. And so we're starting to see a resurgence of, you know, the city of Milwaukee, sort of a renaissance taking place. But what I would argue is because we are in a state where it's 85% white, we're seeing a backlash and a pushback. And we're hoping that we can seize power not only in Milwaukee, but across the state. And there are counties throughout the state of Wisconsin where there are more Black and brown people living than ever before. And it's my goal over the next 18 to 24 months to make sure that those folks get registered, connected, and mobilized, because at the end of the day, most of them are young, most of them are Black. But yeah, it's great having Black power, man. It's beautiful. But then again, we also have to not keep the mask on, you know, like Paul Laurence Dunbar talked about the mask, or W.E.B. Du Bois talks about this double consciousness. And sometimes we get in these positions of power and we sort of lose ourselves, like that classic Richard Pryor movie, Which Way's Up, you know, and hopefully we don't do that. And that's why you have to have good, strong outside agitators pushing like one hood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So now we're at the 8 o'clock hour. You know, we're gonna jump to just final comments, like closing statements. We'll start with Lee, Farouk, and then go to Biko and close out for that. I want to thank y'all again and again for those who just tuning in. You know, we have Lee Owens joining us from Philadelphia, Dr. Rob Biko Baker joining us from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and also my good friend and my colleague with the One Hood family of organizations, Farouk Al-Saeed. But Lee, yeah, any closing thoughts you want to share with us before we adjourn for tonight?
Thank you. Really briefly, first of all, David Crawley is a really good friend of mine. He's a great guy, and I'm so proud of what he's doing in Milwaukee. When he first said he wanted to do that, I was like, what? Milwaukee? What? I didn't even know you lived in Milwaukee. But it's great what he's doing, and I love to see it. But the last thing I just want to say is based on something that Farouk was saying earlier, that, you know, about the police is that more police don't make us safe. And I think more and more we're seeing that. We saw it in Uvalde, right? And if you remember the summer, Philadelphia, the shooting on South Street, right? Someone in power said that we need more police. There should have been more police there. I don't know how much y'all know about South Street in Philadelphia, okay? But it's one of the most over-policed corridors in America.
Come on.
Right? So if there's police anywhere, they're on South Street. And I know for a fact they were right across the street from where the shooting started. So if whoever's listening, like, I don't know if we're preaching to the choir or if we're changing hearts and minds here, but more police don't make us safe, period.
Amen.
Thank you, Farouk. Final thoughts?
Yeah, man. I wasn't alive when Jesse Jackson ran, nor Ronald Reagan. I just wanted to start out at Biko. I came along shortly after. No, yeah, man. You know, I think that you know, we summed up a lot of good things, but you know, one final point that I would like to say is that, you know, there is a cultural impression that was kind of like felt with this election, right? This one felt personal for a lot of people, probably a lot more so than the presidential election. And I think because there are so many people who are, you know, so closely impacted by these local elections and by these midterms. So that's going to like kind of shape up for this bedlam that's going to happen in 2024, that you got Trump running, Kanye, and Ron DeSantis. It's like I honestly thought there was no way in hell that the Democrats are going to win the presidential seat again. But I was like, I don't know. If you got these three, like, you know what I mean, fighting for a seat, they might actually just win by default. I don't know. But I say all that to say that, you know, you can take politics personal to a point, right? But the one thing I will ask everybody to do is have difficult conversations and piss somebody off at Thanksgiving this year, please.
Always.
Biko, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I just think we're at a unique moment where we're building political power, and the moves and methods of the last 8 years are sort of like dying down. And I would say that maybe that people of color have to identify and start pushing the Biden agenda. Don't want to end here, but I do believe that from the infrastructure bill to the $5 billion invested into nonviolence interruption, and then, you know, over $100 billion in infrastructure, broadband investment. There's a lot for us to get our teeth into. And if we let people on the outside of the movement sort of like keep us in this identity politics swirl, we ain't gonna get nothing. And so I really do believe that it's time for us to seek our teeth in the Democratic Party and force them to do right by us. We could still be on the outside, but some of us absolutely, and when I mean some of us brothers, you know, have to go on the inside of this Democratic Party and bring it down.
Thank you for that. And again, thank you, Lee Owens, Rob Biko Baker, and Farouk Al-Saeed for joining us for a special One Hood Power Hour tonight about Black men and the political process. And now I believe Miracle is going to be joining us back to take us out. But thank you so much for joining us, Lee, Farouk, and Dr. Rob Biko Baker.
Yes, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. We are so amazingly thankful and grateful they took time to talk with us tonight. I know I was listening in the background. You had a really good conversation and talking about a lot of things. So I really hope that if you're watching, this was something that was enlightening to you, talking about these issues and the hopes and the futures for electoral organizing when it comes to Black men. Here in Pennsylvania, Austin Davis, who is the first Black lieutenant governor, made history. And he and 2 other people will have to be replaced in the Pennsylvania legislature. So please make sure you are registered to vote. There's going to be a special election, hopefully announced the next couple of weeks. We'll have those dates in place. So please make sure you're registered to vote so you can participate in those races. In addition, you have 2 Black men running for the Senate in Georgia. That electoral date is December 6th. And you can actually start early voting on Saturday due to a judicial ruling. So please make sure you're registered to vote, you're mobilized, you're engaging. I hope you saw today that there's so many issues that impact people's lives that can actually be either solved or severely mitigated through electoral organizing. As always, thank you so much for supporting us. We have a lot of great things coming to you this week. As a reminder for the 100 Media Network, this Saturday at noon, we're going to be launching Brunch with a Black Man. So you have nothing to do this Saturday, or you're with your family this weekend, want to talk about mental health, please turn into Brunch with a Black Man this Saturday at noon. As always, we have a lot of great things in store for you. So please stay tuned. Make sure you're liking and subscribe to our social media channels. And with that, we will see you next week for a very special Power Hour where we're talking more about electoral organizing, but more about some wins that have happened and why it's so important that you stay involved. So we'll see you next week on the next edition of the 100 Power Hour. I'm your host, Miracle Jones, signing off from our co-host, Khari Mosley. I hope you all have a great evening.
Over the course of a few years, life yielded a crisis of pandemics, resulting in many reeling and searching for answers. Black men especially have had to grieve the passing of hip-hop icons DMX, Michael K. Williams, Biz Markie, and many others. How has this impacted Black men? How has this altered the way they see themselves, their ability to express themselves, and their mental health? We sit down with Black men raised on the culture of hip-hop and ask them directly, let's have a bite, take a step back in order to move forward. I'm your host, Miracle Jones, and this is Brunch with the Black Man.